Okay, so I've been working on a whole new series of videos to go along with the ARM research to look at the modern player, the modern power player, the guys who are out there truly getting it done, who are leading the field, leading the world in how to hit a ball with a stick. That's really what we're doing, right? That's all golf is. That's what we're all about. So what I want to do is I'm going to show you, we're going to start with number one today. I'm going to give you a top 10 list of the things that the modern players are doing. And then we're going to look at them, and these are not the things that everybody talks about all the time, like, oh, they have a flat left wrist at impact, or they are, their hips are open, or they have lag, or they're releasing the club, whatever. I'm talking about the stuff that nobody talks about, but they're hugely important in understanding the dynamics of how the body moves, and they're going to help you hit the ball further with less effort. So let's talk about some of these things. We're going to use Rory and DJ here. Obviously, Rory's on the left, DJ's on the right. And the first thing that we're going to talk about in this top 10 list is how the right knee works in the swing. And I'm going to show you with my own swing two different ways of accomplishing the same things. And I'm going to show you what DJ and Rory do. So I've drawn a line basically on the outside of their right knee. And then we're going to pull up some amateur golfers to kind of show you the opposite, and some tour pros who do this differently and don't hit the ball very far at all. So let's start with Rory and DJ. The first thing you're going to know is obviously the right knee is going to move away. They're turning their hips. They're letting that right leg straighten a little bit. Now, many amateurs let this thing go ramrod straight and hyperextend that knee during the backswing. That obviously doesn't work, but they're maintaining some flexion. And then as they come down, this is the part that I want to focus on today, is the right knee moving past, dramatically past that line where the knee was at address. So we'll move DJ up there too. You'll see in his case, he doesn't move it nearly as dramatically as Rory does. You're going to see everybody do these things a little bit differently. But there's where he was at address, and now at impact, you can see DJ's knees starting to show up on the other side. Rory, on the other hand, has a dramatic right knee, right hip, really, drive that's causing that right knee to move forward and get his hips very open at impact. Now, of course, every single tour pro on the planet who hits the ball anywhere out of their shadow, you're going to see both butt cheeks at impact just like that. With amateur golfers, we're going to see the opposite, and I'm going to start to show you why, what's going on with that, and how you can put this move in your swing to add more power in the second part of this video. So again, I want you just to draw your attention. We'll go through just DJ's really quickly, just so you can focus on one at a time. Here's where the right knee is at address. It moves away. DJ's moves a lot. He lets that right knee really move back. And then as he starts down, everything begins to unwind and rotate. Again, I'm going to talk about how the stuff is done. There's definitely more than one way to skin this cat, and you'll see different results as a result of that. But you'll see that right knee moves forward pretty dramatically. Now let's just take a look at a typical amateur golfer. We're going to replace DJ here, and we're going to put up an amateur golfer who you will see. Now this camera angle is not ideal, but you'll still get the idea of what's going on and what tends to happen with most golfers. So you'll see the right leg gets straightened up pretty severely. Again, the camera angle makes it look a little bit worse than it probably actually is. But now as he comes down, you see, watch how the right knee, instead of beginning to increase this knee flex during the transition, it hyperextends, it even gets fully locked out. And if we take Rory as an example, back to the top of his swing, and as he gets ready into the transition, watch how his right knee moves first. And again, it's not just the right knee. I'm going to talk about that in the second part of the video, video 2, that's going to show you how to do this move correctly and how to do it without creating a ton of side bend or a lot of lateral movement, etc. But you'll see again that the tour pros are going to have a lot of knee flex. I'm going to pull up some other tour pros in just a moment. But you can see in Rory's case, that's pretty obvious, dramatically different. And then we take a look at our amateur here. And then as he goes, this is so common where they start to straighten the knee, height, raise the height of the right hip, and then rotation becomes very difficult. Because remember, as you're rotating, both sides of the body are working. The right side and the left side are creating rotation. Now, most golfers, and I tend to focus more on the lead side because most golfers tend to dominate it with the trail side because they're right-handed. The right side dominant, their left side, using their left side is like speaking a foreign language for most golfers. That's one of the challenges of the game, is training both sides how to balance everything out. And so I tend to focus more on the lead side, but of course, you're working on both sides. Both pairs are working. So in this case, you can see his right side is fully locked out. He can't use his right leg, right hip to help rotate his hips, speed up that rotation at all. And so he has kind of the old dreaded arm swing. There's really not much hip activation at all, and he can't really get any power out of it. Let's take a look at another golfer. Here's a different player with similar moves, and you'll see if you don't get your hips open at impact, you'll see that's very common here. Again, the arms are really swinging pretty aggressively here, and he's trying to use the right leg. You can see he didn't straighten it out like the last golfer, but you can see his hips are barely open at impact. You can't really see that left leg at all. And again, if we run through Rory over here on the left, you'll see a ton of his left hip and left leg as he gets down into the hitting area. And this is more like what most AMs tend to look like. They tend to not use their hips very well at all, and they tend to use all arms and hands, and so they don't get their bodies open at impact. Let's take a look at another tour pro who does this really well. This is Allison Lee. She's a great LPGA player, and we'll put a line on her knee so you can kind of compare and contrast how different players at different abilities, different power levels create these movements. But you'll see the exact same thing in Allison's swing. She's got a beautiful golf swing. And watch how much that right knee, right hip begin to help rotate. The hips clear out of the way. You can see both butt cheeks. And her right leg is way in front of where it's, right knee, way in front of where it started to address, and then gets into what I call the hip kick here. We'll talk about that in another video. But you'll see, again, a lot of right knee drive working together to help rotate the pelvis. They're working in pairs to rotate the body. Now, let's take a look at a tour pro who doesn't hit the ball very far, but obviously still a phenomenal golfer. Brian Gay, he's a great golfer, but you're going to see a lot of differences, even just from setup. If you look at Allison, she's got more of a flat back, a little better posture. Brian's a lot more rounded, a little slouchy at address, if you will. And then as we move him back, what you'll notice is his right knee starts to move, but then he never gets back to that line. And this is really just all arms and shoulders throwing the club at the ball, and there's no power there. And now Brian, again, great golfer, very accurate ball striker, great wedge player, but no power. You can look at this, look at the data. It doesn't lie. He doesn't hit the ball very far, and this is a big part of why he's not able to use his hips. You can see his right leg kind of straightened, pretty much just like the amateur that I showed you earlier, and this is not going to hit the ball anywhere. There's no hip rotational speed. So he's really going to rely on arms and hands for all his power, and there's just only so much you can get out of that. You'll see, again, watch his hands as he starts down. You'll notice that he kind of makes what's more of a typical amateur move, to be honest, is that his hands actually start moving out toward the ball during the transition. You'll see that they kind of loop forward, and if we contrast that with Allison, whose moves are a little bit more typical of a tour pro, her hands almost tend to go, not so much with the driver, but with the irons, you see especially she tends to shallow out a lot better and weight on it, and her arm's a little bit more passive, and she uses more hip rotation to get the speed out of her swing, whereas Brian is going to get those arms firing really aggressively from the top, shoulders firing from the top, and so they're going to end up in very different positions. You'll see his arms much further away, right elbow's much further away from his hip just because he's activated. He's fired those arms because that's where he's getting his speed from. So now let's take a look at two different ways of skinning this cat, and then I'll get out and I'll demonstrate this stuff a little bit more outside with another video. So let's take a look at my swing. We will look at it from down the line. Now on the left is going to be, let me sync these up. So you'll see both of these are essentially the same swing, but powered two slightly different ways. So let's go, I'll put lines on both of my knees here just to kind of give you again a starting point. And you'll see that both we're going to accomplish the same movements but two very different ways. So on the right, and you can already start to see during the transition, there's a lot more knee flex on the right. And you'll see my right knee has already busted through that line where it was at address. This is a lot more right side driven. I've talked a lot about the arm research stuff that I've done. And so again, 2 different ways of skinning the cat. But for those who are really right side dominant, this is what you would look like. You're going to, and this is more like Rory's, if you remember Rory's swing that we started with, where Rory's right knee is really aggressively driving forward. You saw the same thing in Allison Lee's swing. And on the left, you'll see that my right knee hasn't quite broken that line. So even though hitting the same club, same distance, all of that stuff, there's 2 very different ways of doing things. One, on the left, I'm using way more left hip rotation, which again, I'll talk about in the second video. And then on the right, I'm using way more right hip rotation. And both, again, even through the hitting area, you'll see the little hip hitch that I was talking about earlier. My hips stall as the club gets flung through the hitting area. My right leg then straightens and posts up. More so on the swing on the right because I'm much more actively using the right side. And on the left side, on the left swing, you'll see that my right hip doesn't quite post up quite the same. So I kind of keep rotating through the hitting area a little bit more. That's normal. What you'll see, I'll talk about the hip hitch, where the hip actually stops or even goes backwards like you see in Rory's swing or Allison's swing. And I'm going to show you how that's done in an upcoming video. But for this one, I just want to focus on the right knee because we don't want to get overwhelmed with a bunch of stuff. But this will help you if you're the type of golfer who just kind of stalls out and straightens that right leg and doesn't get any power out of their hips and knows they should be hitting the ball a lot further than they are. I'm going to show you in the second video how to do that. Now, if you're watching this video on YouTube, I've put a link to the second video down in the description below. So take a look at that and you will see exactly how we're going to teach you how to move your body exactly like the pros.